So today, guys, we're we're starting PFT 110, Principles of Weight Management, right? So this is going to be one of our program design classes, of which there are going to be 4 main ones here at Sochi, but at the same time, you get basically an entire mod of program design when you get to capstone. So with Mo, you're going to also have like plenty of time to practice this stuff. But my job is to get you prepped, to be able to, go into that knowing everything there is to know. So this is 110. So this is our weight management, I should say, program design class. What we are going to spend a lot of time talking about today is actually very much like an intro day. Today is very, very, very gentle. It's just going to be talking about the obesity epidemic. So we're going to talk about some of the statistics on obesity, what some of the health effects of them are and their comorbidities, which by now you guys are probably really familiar with. You're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, obesity is linked to, coronary artery disease, hypertension, diabetes, like it's linked to all these things. We're going to review all that again today with some specific statistics that NASM is likely to test you on. So, until now we've talked about them for sure. They're already in your notes for sure. But the pro tips, like the stuff that you may, see on a test, that's kind of what we're getting on paper today. So it's like our final review of all that stuff. Not that it won't come up, at least a few more times in conversation, but like that's today. Tomorrow, we're going to do the physiology of weight control. So tomorrow, I need to put that on silent because that's going to blow up. Tomorrow we're going to do the physiology of weight control. So we're going to be looking at like, what are the principles, when the body loses weight, where does all that like body weight go? Spoiler alert, you exhale it and sweat most of it out and actually lose some of it through your pee. But we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Day 3 is actually one of my favorites. It's the psychology of weight control. What's really cool about this is going to kind of set us up for next mod actually. Because our next module, our 8-day middle class in that mod will be exercise psychology. So it'll be a lot of talking about habits and stuff. So we're going to get to a little bit of an intro into that. We're going to see the stages of change again. So we're going to mention that as well. And then we've got nutrition strategies for weight loss. So these are like the pro tips, when your client's like, should I eat big meal? Should I do intermittent fasting? Should I do this? Should I do this? Right? What should I do? And it's like, this is where we're going to break that down for our clients, make it easy. Basic method training methodologies here on day 6. Now this one is where we're going to talk about some of the principles. This is where this class gets just a little odd because and it's almost a little bit out of order because you can see we've got like all of these reps and stuff that we're going to talk about down here. But the methodologies part is like, what are some of the principles to maximize caloric expenditure, right? Like when it comes down to it, like what type of cardio should your client be doing? What type of strength training lifts in general, right? This isn't really going to talk too much about reps and sets and stuff. This isn't going to have very many rules that actually present themselves in like test form. So I don't think that this day here is actually that great for like, test prepping and things like that. But I love this day regardless, because it is a really great place where you talk about some of the principles that you just want to keep in the back of your head whenever you're making exercise choices, right? Should I choose that one or that one? And it's like, that one's got them on their feet. It burns more calories. Their goal is to burn as many calories as possible. I picked that one, right? Both are good. They just have different like purposes and stuff, We'll talk about how to avoid and break plateaus. So this is kind of a fun one because we'll actually talk about like, and weight management myths. Both of these are actually together. Breaking plateaus and weight management. I like this day because it's like, I heard that low fat is the way to go. Is that true? No. I heard that high fat is the way to go. Is that true? No. But then at the same time, maybe yes. It's what really comes down to is just creating a caloric deficit. And then the weight loss programming application. So this is where we will really start diving into, like I said, reps, sets, tempo, intensity, things like that, from an exercise selection standpoint. So we're going to break this down into 2 different days because I need you guys to be super familiar with NASM's what's called OPT model. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. The OPT model is basically a model that does all the work of physiology for you, right? like you guys understand the principles of physiology now. We just talked a lot about it over the last couple of days, couple of weeks rather. You know, if I said, Isaiah, I want you to pick a rep range that targets primarily fat as like the primary energy source. If you heard that, you'd probably go, okay, well, fat, that means low intensity. Low intensity means high repetition. So I'm probably going to pick a high repetition scheme. And if I said, Kenny, I want you to pick a rep scheme that targets primarily the phosphagen system, right? So you're going to go, okay, well, that only lasts 10 seconds. So I'm probably going to keep the reps 5 reps or below, right? And if I said, Andres, I want you to target, then I want you to be in the middle of all that. Like I want you to primarily stay in glycolysis. You're going to go, okay, well, that's 30 to 50 seconds, probably 6 to 12 reps, you know? So you could consider all that, which is what what a lot of personal trainers had to do until NASM came along. But luckily, NASM's actually got all of these, principles kind of tied into this model that does all the work for you. And I need you guys to have that model tattooed on the back of your eyelids. We got to know it inside, outside. It's like 40% of the questions on your test. Is understanding that model, inside and out. So we're going to get into that model for the first time on day 8, which is really late compared to some of our other program design classes. And then we will follow that up immediately the next day with a big chart where we do all the numbers. And then there it is, guys, review and final exam. That's your final day in this course. So you guys will officially, I guess it's just the 3 of you today right now. That'll be, you'll no longer be newbies. You guys will be able to push the new people coming around, push all the newbies that are coming in the next mod around. This will be somewhere around like the middle of the month. So that is where we are headed over the next few days. You guys have any questions? Any comments about what this class is about or anything like that? Hopefully you're starting to see, when it's all laid out, kind of now that you've been like, okay, we went through physiology, then we went through nutrition. Now we're doing like a weight loss mod, right? We see that they're all kind of like interconnected. This is all, I'd say 25% of the types of conversations you're going to have in your careers, right? And then we'll fill out the other 75% in our other mods. Next mod is going to be the psychology, a little bit more anatomy and physiology. Then we're going to go into like psychology. And then we'll go into how to train kids, because when you're training kids, psychology is a big part of that. It's all about like habit change and stuff, right? We're not necessarily trying to create the world's most athletic youth. We're just trying to get good habits, right? Next mod after that, we'll go into kinesiology. So we'll look at human movement. Then we'll talk about special populations, like certain diseases that are very common for us to deal with in the gyms. And then we'll talk about how to train seniors, which seniors, we want to make sure they move properly. We know they have a lot of those special population conditions, and we got to be able to train them. And then lastly, we'll finish it up. But your final mod, guys, is going to be the assessments, sales, and sports mod, which tends to be everybody's favorite. Just because it's like, a lot of speed ladder stuff and jumping and throwing stuff around. It's all that stuff's a blast. But to be fair, some of that actually shows up here in the weight loss mod too. So that's kind of fun. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and let's go ahead and dive on in here. We're going to go through chapters 1 and 2 today for our weight loss mod. Pretty small PowerPoint today, nothing too crazy. I will say these program design classes, actually I should mention this like right off the, why did I open that one? I should mention this right off the bat. These program design classes, we haven't had a lot of assigned reading. We've got like this chapter 17 in your regular NASM textbook, that nutrition chapter. Hopefully everybody has gone through that by now. But this class is one of, I call these the program design classes. Some students affectionately refer to them as packet classes, which I like. I think that's a great nickname for it, because it is actually. Let's take a look here. Take a look right here, guys. This class is taught out of this manual right here. So there are two actually. There's actually two manuals. I'm going to send both these today. You're going to see these up on Canvas. I just remembered. Isaiah, I broke my streak. I had it. I had like 3 days in a row, and I forgot. All right, hold on. Let me enable. I got to enable today's. Damn it. Well, reset the counter.
I think you did already.
What's that?
I think you already did.
Oh, no, I didn't. I know, I don't get credit. It just happens to already be up from last time because I haven't.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I hide them.
Because I'm following, but I'm like.
I know. I hide them so people don't accidentally get ahead. I don't get credit. That was a happy accident. All right.
Gotcha.
By the way, if you did find this and it was at the bottom, I just moved it to the very top. So now you can see everything is in sort of reverse chronological order.
Yeah, that's the bottom.
So when you go here, guys, you will see this manual right here. So this is an extra download that everybody needs to pick up today. I will also have this, attached in your email and a link to it and all that and blah, blah, blah. But when you open it, it will be, I don't know why I just downloaded it. I probably have like 50 copies of this on my computer at this point. I just keep making copies. Here is this manual, right? So this is its own separate textbook. And the reason it's a separate textbook, and just so you guys know, another benefit of us doing this way, if you go to nasm.org and you look at their continuing education section, and you go to weight loss down here, all of the materials that we're teaching in this class are coming from NASM's WLS certification. That's their weight loss specialist certification. Remember, we've talked about this before, you got to get your CEUs every 2 years, right? Well, this one is actually enough to be worth a full recertification. It's worth 1.9 CEUs. You need to earn 2.0 every 2 years, but 0.1 of it has to be CPR, so you really only need to earn 1.9. You can see here, it is built entirely around the idea, like the curriculum of, introduction to weight loss specialists. You can see here, this is what we're going over today. And then the science of it, assessments, and then the coaching process, blah, 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 right? So it's all the chapters that you're going to see right in here. So keep your notes forever, guys, because in 6 years, when you need to recertify, you can probably just look back through all this and have a much easier time if you ever decide to get this certification. So that's NASM's WLS certification, and that is basically what all this material is based on. So it's a packet class, meaning there is no official textbook that exists for this, but everyone should be reading this packet. So today we're going to do chapters 1 and 2. I expect you guys to try to get through chapters 1 and 2 today. It's going to be 19 pages. Okay. It's nothing. And look, they're 19 pages with a ton of charts, pictures. It'll take you, I don't know, 35, 40 minutes to get through the whole thing, probably. First chapter is literally 8 pages. And then look, an entire day of citations. Yeah, you're going to blast through this stuff in no time. So after class, what I recommend, especially for these packet classes, I don't know how many people actually take my advice on this, but I always tell you guys, take a little break. Don't immediately start studying like crazy. Go take a little break, go for a walk, do something, come back, get your notes out, review what we went over in class, maybe copy your notes over, and then read through each chapter. Okay. The day out, the same day, or if you're an evening student who's watching this video, the next morning. Yeah. What's up, Kenny?
What part of the chapter is it going to be on?
So this chapter every day. So you'll download this manual today, right? Keep it on your phone, keep it on your computer, whichever version you're going to do. And you just read through whichever chapters we're going through. So here, let me get that day by day open again. So you'll basically just read along with the chapters that I am kind of going through. Okay. Today it'll be reading through chapters 1 and 2, so you get a double chapter today, but it's, like I said, the first one's really short. Tomorrow it'll just be chapter 3. The day after that, chapter 4, 5, 6, 7. On day 7, you'll read through 8 and 9 together. And then on day 8, read through chapter 10. And that's not chapter 10 in your regular NASM textbook. It's out of these packets, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's pretty clear now.
Okay, yeah. So think of this as a separate textbook. This book doesn't exist, by the way. The reason we don't give this to you as like a book is because like it doesn't actually, there is no real book. It's just I mean, I'm sure NASM has like one copy that they printed, like, like probably like sitting on a bookshelf somewhere in their office, like on a shelf of a bunch of other ones for display. But like, it's only a digital version that exists. So you'll end up doing that. I will say, for anybody who has a really hard time, if anybody has a really hard time reading digitally, if you find that like reading this manual on your phone or something like that is a problem, shoot me a text, let me know, and I can run down to Sochi and print a couple copies of this. We have like a super printer. I can print out these packets as like they'll be on like 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, so it'll be like fax paper and stuff. It won't read like a book, but if you want a copy of this like hard, let me know. I just don't print them like by default because like I know some people are just like fine with the digital copies. They're like, I'm just gonna read it on my Kindle or whatever, or my phone, or this and that. And it saves a couple trees, because it is like probably 100 pages altogether. But if you want a copy, because you're just like, look, I'm trying to read on my phone and I feel like I'm aging because I'm squinting all the time. Just let me know. Let me know and I'll totally print a copy for you. Okay. Just shoot me a text, shoot me an email. The earlier you let me know, the faster I can get it to you. Okay. So keep me posted. We can even send it through the mail if we have to, if we're worried about it. All right, guys. So that's a rundown of what we're going to be doing for the next 10 class days. Let's get the lecture part going, right? Let's dive in. So, whoops, Callie, you're in charge of teaching. I got to stop doing that. I got to remember that they freaking changed Zoom. I got to stop hitting that wrong button. All right. So let's take a look here at chapter 1. So this is going to be talking, they call it this chapter is the obesity epidemic, right? So really what we mean here is we're just going to be kind of looking at the statistics behind obesity. So we're going to look at some pretty sort of frightening statistics here, at least in terms of like how this stuff is on the climb. It's plateaued a little bit in the last few years. But yeah, let me close some of this here just so I can make a little bit of space on my computer. I don't need this. All right. So our objectives are to get through a brief understanding and overview of like this epidemic and its effects that it has, right? I mean, we're saying epidemic here actually instead of pandemic because this is kind of a domestic problem. I mean, don't get me wrong, obesity exists in all countries of the world, but like not at the levels, not at some of what we see in like a lot of the quote unquote like Western world, right? We definitely know that like in America, we have obesity problems in particular. So we're gonna look at that. After this chapter, we wanna understand the difference between overweight and obese. So we've talked about that before. We're gonna see that statistic again, which means, like I said earlier, if you are seeing repeated information, it's because it's probably gonna show up in some form of a test question. And we understand like what are the reasons, like why the heck is this stuff on the rise? What's causing obesity to grow so much, and then how it affects these populations. Like what are all the overall effects? So we do know that obesity has been linked to a lot of negative health conditions, coronary heart disease being the biggest one, right? Which is the #1 killer of adults in the US. So makes sense, right? We definitely see there's a connection between like obesity and coronary heart disease. And we know Coronary heart disease is the #1 thing that kills us, and we know that we have a lot of obese people in this country, right? So we definitely see, like, I don't know about causation, but we definitely see like a correlation there to be sure. We know that it causes hypertension. It makes it harder for your blood vessels to be able to function the way that they're supposed to, causing like areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure. We know it's associated with type 2 diabetes, especially in particularly that abdominal fat that we talked about when we were looking at waist to hip ratios the other day. We were talking about that. That's a very common one. That one and dyslipidemia. This is high cholesterol, is the big fancy name for high cholesterol. Both of these highly associated with abdominal obesity in particular. We know that it is increased with certain risks of cancers. Now, I think personally, like the connection here, this is another example of like, I don't know about causation, like obesity is, I don't think, necessarily more likely to cause cancer, but again, we see like a link between like the same habits that cause obesity are the same habits that cause you to eat certain, processed foods and things like that. And it can be linked to different types of depression. I mean, it messes with your endocrine system. Your hormones are not able to function the way that they're supposed to, and they don't make, the types of neurotransmitters that we need. And so, we definitely know that there's a lot of different conditions linked with this. And we also know that like there are a lot of like specific like financial burdens associated with this as well, right? The financial burden of obesity, this is back in 2008, but it was around $147 billion per year. This is a long time ago. Like this, and inflation's only gone up. I'm kind of curious if we can actually find this statistic currently. What is the economic impact of obesity in the United States? Okay, well, that's saying 1.7 trillion. There is absolutely no way it has gone up from 147 billion. That would be increased by literally 10 times as much. Not that I'm saying that's wrong. I'm just saying we're probably looking at different versions of this statistic here. But we are seeing, I get, okay, so they're looking at like loss of productivity. So what we were looking back in 2008 is that people, like individuals, were paying 147 billion per year in obesity-related healthcare costs, right? So like you were on a blood pressure medication and had to spend money on it, right? You were going to the hospital to see your doctor, had to pay a copayment, right? Like little things like that. That was the economic burden there. But if this is looking at a slightly different side of it, which is like, what does it cost everybody in general, right? Well, it's about 1.7 trillion per year, with 1.24 trillion of it being in like loss of productivity. Someone passed a doctor's appointment, can't go to work. The company has to like pay somebody else to pick up their shift and pay them overtime. And that causes all of this money, to be lost, right? And that costs all of us money, so there's a reason why, like, when you look at companies raising their prices and stuff, like this is expensive for all of us. There's a reason we want to be as healthy as possible as an overall country. It's why paying attention to our health is something that is important for all of us to do. And it's why you guys are out there along with me trying to help as many people as possible and have like as large of an impact as we can. It's not just like a health issue, it's an economic issue. I always like to just mention that really briefly, and I'm no economics expert, but we definitely know that like the cost of stuff like this, it makes sense. I always get into arguments, just like everybody else does at the holidays. Politics is the first thing that comes up around Thanksgiving. It's always interesting because it's like you look at like the government spending money on something, and people like they're like, it's so annoying they're spending all this money. I'm like, it saves all of us money. Like if it makes people healthy, it just has to succeed, if we spend a bunch of time like redoing the freaking food pyramid, which is a nightmare, the original food pyramid was garbage, right? If we spend a little bit of money like redoing that and we come up with a my plate system that's like a little bit more effective, that's exactly what I want my money going towards. So there's definitely a financial burden here. And by the way, look at this. Go back 10 years, right? 1998, those costs were about 78 billion. We're going to see some rising statistics over time here in just a minute. What we are currently seeing is that about 69.2% of U.S. adults are overweight or obese. That statistic's actually a little bit higher now. And that's overweight or obese, with about I think 40% of the population falling into the obese category. So again, we're going to define it using our BMI scale, not the greatest scale in the world to judge overall health, but it is a great tool for looking at large scale populations. If I'm looking at tens of thousands of people, I like the BMI scale. It's effective, you know. Is it a great way to determine your health and use it on an individual status? Definitely not. Stay away from that type of thinking. But body mass index, common method for categorizing individuals on their height versus their weight, right? Here's that formula you guys got to get memorized, right? It is your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Just for the sake of trivia, I'm going to put this up here and then I'm going to immediately delete it. But for anybody who, you know, isn't feeling like they want to convert and deal with the metric system, you could also do this version. It is your weight in pounds divided by your height in inches squared. I got to do the little superscript thing here. Font. Super. It is your weight in pounds divided by your height in inches squared. Oh, god dang it. And then you multiply the entire thing by 703. Whoa. By 703. So if you are interested in doing, you know, our silly American version, because we're the only freaking country that doesn't use metric. Weight in pounds divided by height in inches squared times 703. I know that seems really surprising, but like, because it comes out to a really weird number. So if I go like 175 divided by 73, 73 times 73. So that's going to be 175 divided by 5,329. It gives you this weird freaking super small number. But you multiply that whole thing by 703, and guess what? It actually comes out to exactly what your BMI is. There's the American version, and I will delete it because this is the one you'll actually be tested on. You'll never see that other version, by the way. The imperial version will never be on like a test question. It will always be weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. Get it memorized. So we are going to see our categories here, right? Underweight being a BMI of less than 18.5, normal weight 18.5 to 24.9, overweight being 25 up to 29.9, and then BMI being greater than 30, with a couple other special classes here if we are talking about like the extreme obesity cases. So we see obesity class 2, somewhere between 30 and 39.9, and obesity class 3 being greater than 40, right? So obviously we do know that these categories do have like increased risk of certain comorbidities, right? Certain like common chronic diseases. And so we know that about 1/3 of Americans are currently obese. So we're seeing, they're saying 33% there. It's actually about 40%. Let's take a look here. Obesity. That's not how you spell that. City statistics in the US. There we go. That'll work. All right. So this is the CDC's website. And they did a report, and it's called The State of Obesity. And let's take a look. Actually, is this the one I want? Sorry. This one? No. There it is. All right. Where are my charts? There's my charts. Let's go with adults first. All right, so here's our obesity rates here, guys. This is going to be kind of interesting. We've only got 2019 up here. Because obviously 2020 just happened, and also 2020 was crazy. But here are our current statistics, right? Let's zoom in here. So this chart, this is showing you the percentage of adults with a BMI, and this is obesity, right? We're looking at a BMI of 30 or above. And it's what percentage of the population, right? So I don't know what happened to Maryland there. They're actually, I don't know, and New Jersey apparently as well. I'm assuming they didn't maybe measure. But if you're taking a look here, right, we're seeing blue is going to be less than 10% of the population. Teal is up 10 to 15%, right? But we don't really see any of those. We see greater than 35% of the population. We see a lot of purple, right? We see greater than 30%. That's pretty common. A lot of red. And then we see some orange in here, 25 up to 30. With Colorado, man, freaking Colorado is always at the top of the list in terms of healthiest. Only, somewhere between 20 and 24.9. With Mississippi sort of being the worst here, 40% of the population in Mississippi of adult population is currently obese. Followed by West Virginia, Arkansas, Oklahoma. Scrolling down, and where'd you go, Colorado? I guess District of Columbia is actually tied up with Colorado. That's new. Way to go, DC. And then Hawaii. Man, my Oregon has fallen. I haven't actually looked too much at the 2019 statistics. Oregon used to be third. So those are our obesity statistics, right? Now, let's take a look here. I'm going to go back in time. Let's take a look. Here's our chart, right? Let's see if I can get it on one page here. Oh, just a little more. Okay, here's our chart. Let's go back to 2018. We're looking for this to, get a little less purple. So, 2018. Let's go back even further in time. Let's see. That was 2019. Let's go back to 2015, right? Take a look at this. We've actually got some yellow categories, right? Not quite as bad. Let's go back to 2010. Colorado representing the green a little bit. And then let's get pre-cell phones here. Let's get to where before everybody was walking around with a cell phone. Let's go back to 2004. Look at that. That is a substantial difference, right? New Jersey, actually top of the list, still Mississippi, but Mississippi at 28% of the population instead of 40%, right?
What happened?
Sedentary world. That's kind of what we're going to talk about today, right? Like what happened? We saw increased reliance on technology. Oops, I went back too far. It took us back to the first page. We see cell phones, we see YouTube, we see more time in front of a computer, less time outside. Increased, like it's easier to get unhealthy foods. It's pretty fascinating. I mean, there really is no like one specific, it's just an increasingly modernized world. Now, the earliest that they've gotten, you're going to see a lot on here that didn't measure. Let's go back to 1990. Look at that. Most of these, like I said, a lot of these are not measured. But back in 1990, Colorado, 7% of the population only was obese. The worst, Mississippi still, at 15%. 15% up to 40 in, I guess that's about 30 years or so. Pretty crazy, right?
I'm sorry. Have you incorporated Oklahoma, which is where I'm from?
It's on here. I'm assuming Oklahoma is usually, I've seen them on the list, like pretty close, but back in 1990, let's see here, Oklahoma.
I moved when I was 4. I'm a California girl. I'm not obese, but I have family members that are.
10% back in 1990. Let's take it up to 2019. I've seen Oklahoma's high on the list if I remember right. Yep, number 4, 36%. Right below Arkansas and West Virginia. Anybody else looking for their home state?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Friggin' Oregon. God, they lost it. Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. They were like a holdout, and now they're falling down the list. What happened? All right, let's take a look at kids. Let's take a look at the youth versions of all this, right? So that's high school. I don't want the high school one. I just want youths in general. Give me different charts. All right, I guess we'll go with 10 to 17. That's a big range. All right, let's look at 10 to 17. Between 2018 and 2019, again, we are seeing this time actually Utah is top on the list in terms of or I guess bottom of the list, 9.6%, with Kentucky being at the top actually by a pretty wide margin. Look at that gap. 23% of the population in Kentucky, 22% in Mississippi. Oklahoma for kids, not seeing it on here actually. Where'd you go, Oklahoma? Oh, there it is. In the green still. Only 18%. Let's go back. We'll do 2016, I guess is when they started tracking these statistics. But it's always shocking just to see the colors change on the chart, you know. New Hampshire, Washington, Oregon is fourth. Mississippi massively. Mississippi must have made some big changes to get themselves back down the list. But 26% of the population back in 2016. That's actually an improvement. Mississippi's actually gotten better over time. Good for them. Yeah, they're down 4%. So anyway, those are just some interesting statistics about obesity. Now, Andres, you asked, right? Well, what the heck, man? What's going on? The causes of obesity. I mean, we know that weight management comes down to energy in versus energy out. But why are we so bad at managing it is almost the real question, right? Because we know what causes obesity, right? We know what causes weight gain. More energy in versus energy out. That's always the answer. It's the only answer, right? But that answer is not exactly helpful. As much as we know that is scientifically accurate and true, it doesn't, sometimes knowing that doesn't help us very much if we don't know how to translate that information into a lifestyle change, right? So what the heck is sort of on the small level, like the human cause, right? Well, it's complicated. We all agree that it's, a multitude of factors. Sometimes it's environmental. If you grew up in somewhere like Mississippi, or you said you moved away from Oklahoma, right? If you grew up around that, right? That a lot of times, that environment, I say this all the time. I love the South. Every time I've been to the South, the food there is incredible. The people are really, really friendly for the most part. You could not give me a salary to live there. No world in which I will ever move to the South. This is just a personal thing. I just can't stand humidity. Cannot do it.
I did not grow up there.
You're like, don't roll me into this.
No. Southern California girl. I moved when I was 4, but that is my roots. And I do not enjoy going to Walmart and buying big cans of mayonnaise. Okay.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, so environmental, right? Environmental could be a thing. Sometimes it's lifestyle, right? We do know that there's increased reliance on technology, right? Could be your family history as well, right? If you have a family, if you grew up around people who are outdoorsy and active, that's going to burn more calories than people who aren't. Not saying it's better or worse, but I am saying that it definitely results in a different amount of energy expenditure. And then there are genetic factors. Make no mistake, there are inherited genes or certain hormones, right? Do not make any mistake when I say, when I talk about, I spend a lot of time talking about the stuff that we have control over. There is plenty of stuff that you don't have control over, right? But there's so many times where I've talked to clients and stuff, and I know so many people who have sort of like written off their ability to like succeed physically in certain capacities. They'll be like, no, I mean, just everybody in my family is built this way. Like, this is just how I'm built, right? And it's like, there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm giving up on, you know, any ever my goals of like weight loss or whatever. And
I hate that.
it happened. I mean, well, yeah, of course, right? Like, of course, that is hard for people like us to hear, right? That's why you guys all came to this program, you know. But like it happened. Like, this is a very common conversation. So one of the ways that I always like, I like to like kind of try to get people to like step back and see like a little bit more like of a fair view of like what's going on. Is it's like, hey, like I believe that you inherited like plenty of like specific genes. And like, yeah, like your version of like your journey might be a little bit harder. There's going to be some roadblocks on your road that don't exist on that guy over there's road, you know, but they can both lead to the same destination. It just means that you've got to do a couple extra like left-hand turns, you know. It's like a it's like a math equation, right? If 2 + 2, you know, if we're trying to get 4, right, and you start with 2 + 2, you're already there. But me, maybe I started at -89. Like, well, my equation is going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to have to add some more numbers. I'm going to do some multiplication probably. But it doesn't mean that I can't get to 4, quote unquote. 4. I think it just broke my brain. But it doesn't mean that we can't get there, right? So sometimes it's environmental, you know. I definitely grew up, like my mom would talk sometimes about like the idea of like eating a healthy meal, which is so great. Like, you know, I really give my mom kudos for this, because she was the one in charge of like the meals and stuff, you know, despite working a million hours every day and stuff. And she would always talk about like, hey, like, you know, we've eaten really poorly this week. It's really important that like, you know, we're carving out time. We're prioritizing having a healthy dinner tonight. And she really did her best, and like she deserves a lot of credit for it. But let's take a look at some of, you know, our other factors. Sometimes education is a big factor. I know this is a factor like with both of my parents. They
Absolutely.
will often try to do something healthy. They'll send me pictures and they're like, look, we crushed it. And, you know, they got all the pieces of a healthy meal, but the portions are just out of control, you know? And good for them for the effort, you know? But they need a little bit more. They need a little bit more like education. And people aren't experts on this. We are, right? That's what we're here for. So here's the thing. Like I said, we got to translate this scientific fact that we know of weight control being energy in versus energy out into stuff that's manageable, right? Because my parents are, like I said, great example. They know that it's energy in versus energy out. They know it, but they don't know how to manage it. And that's the big thing, right? So, you know, the simple equation, energy in greater than energy out, weight gain. Energy in less than energy out, weight loss. Equal, weight stable, right? But what does that mean? You know, how do we manage those calories? If you are getting your energy in and it's less than your energy out, right? So it's you're on a weight loss program, right? But you're eating it's Girl Scout season, right? It's Girl Scout cookies, right? You know, here's the weird thing, guys. Those Girl Scout cookies, as long as your energy is in the right balance, you could absolutely lose weight on a Girl Scout cookie diet. It's possible. In the realm of physics and chemistry, it can be done biologically. But is it likely in the world that we all live in? Very unlikely, because there's a lot of other factors at play. When you get all that sugar, your blood sugar spikes. That causes your body to get a bunch of energy, but then it pulls all that energy out of your blood and stores it as fat, which doesn't burn very many calories. And then all of a sudden we crash really hard. And then you end up like sitting down. Yeah. Looking at like, yeah, the ideas of like muscle metabolism, right? Muscle burns, I think it's like, was it 4 times as much? How much more energy does 1 pound of muscle burn than 1 pound of fat? I used to have this memorized. 6 calories per hour with muscle versus 2, yeah, it's 4 times as much or 3 times as much. So muscle burns about 3 times as much energy as body fat does. So on average, if you lose a pound of fat and gain a pound of muscle, your body weight stayed the same, but you are now burning an extra 96 calories every day compared to like the first version. This, by the way, is why we love legs so much as trainers. I've said this before, but like there's a reason. Like people are always like, oh God, leg day. Why do trainers love leg day so much? It's because they're huge. They are huge muscles where we can add muscle to that frame so easily, and it will keep you meeting your goals, right? So that is absolutely true, right? It is easier to control your weight the more muscle you have, you know? Just like it's easier to be a millionaire if you're already a millionaire. So like I said, looking at these statistics here, according to the data from the N. Haynes, the survey we kind of looked at, right? 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. That's about 75% actually are over in at least the overweight category, with 35% being in the obese category. Like I said, that could be as high as 40. So what are the reasons? Technology and physical activity, right? We know that just we live in an awesome, amazing, convenient world. I mean, we're trying to get freaking hyperloops that are going to carry us from San Francisco to LA in like 20 minutes. It's amazing the technology that we have available to us, but it does not exactly make us active, right? 50% of the US are not as active as they're supposed to be, right? Which now suddenly we start to see, okay, well, that starts to make a lot of sense. Again, it's a correlation. 25% are not active during their leisure time, so when they do have time off. So this is looking at like 50% are not active in order to enhance their health. At least some people are getting it through their jobs. Some people are just, farmers, or in my family, furniture movers, right? Like some people are just physically active in their jobs, but about 25% of people are not active during like any of their free time, right? So we see a pretty substantial amount. Some people who like has like a white collar job where they can sit down at a desk, but then they have all this free time on their hand and they don't use it to be active. They use it to be sedentary. So we definitely know that inadequate physical activity has been linked to lower income. We know it's linked to education. We know that it is linked to obesity. Then we see like food accessibility. Obviously, we know that we're seeing currently 1 in 3 adults ate 2 or more fruit 2 or more times a day. 1 in 4 ate vegetables 3 or more times a day, right? So we're definitely not seeing very many fruits or vegetables, which are a rich source of micronutrients. We talk about like this idea of like not having much energy because of like technology kind of sapping our energy. What about our food, right? We know that we need, B vitamins to assist in metabolism. We know that we need micronutrients to repair the body, right? We need all these things in order to like keep us physically active. Vitamins and minerals, guys, they have no calories. They have no energy to give, but they allow your body to unlock calories and use them in, to the way that our body is supposed to. We know that societal norms have shifted. We do know that like we've shifted to like labor saving devices, right? Like I said, like, we've got washing machines. When I was a kid, my mom used to make me my parents love antiques, so there's just antiques laying all over our house, and one of them was an antique washboard, and if I did not do my chores, I had to like do it on that, which sucked because that was a lot of times that could have been spent doing something else, but that was the punishment. So that's the thing, right? We do know that like you don't have to wash your laundry like this anymore. You throw it in the machine, you walk away. So we've definitely shifted to like these labor saving devices. I mean, like me, I try to make my life as convenient. I try to do this, I do all my meal prep. It takes me about 3.5 hours to do all my cooking on Sunday because I hate cooking. And I can just throw it in the microwave and it makes my life easier. Food and drink also, right? We do know that like that's been spent more in like leisure time. We see there's more coffee shops in the U.S. than there's ever been. There's a lot of like time to spend doing that. I still think of like coffee as like a social thing. I mean, I have it in the morning now, like after my workouts and stuff to kind of like boost my energy back to normal levels. But like I also always try to get I get coffee like at a coffee shop like once a week whenever I can, with like a buddy of mine. So that's a big one. We do know that socioeconomic status can obviously have a big one as well. You will hear people say this, and this is not necessarily true, but you will hear people say this. Eating healthy is expensive. Now, I actually think that eating healthy is cheaper in a lot of ways. Definitely in the long run, you spend less on healthcare. But a lot of like healthy foods are actually, real like a bag of potatoes, which is incredibly healthy, is one of the cheapest things you can buy in the grocery store. A lot of fresh vegetables are actually very, very inexpensive, frozen as well. However, we do know that time is money. And we do know that like a lot of people, who are working low wage jobs spend a lot of time trying to scrape by and make ends meet on these low wage jobs. And they spend a lot of extra time working overtime just to make ends meet. And then they do not have time to eat healthy. And because that time is money and time is energy, and energy in a lot of ways is money too. Like it's part of it. And so I get the mentality that like eating healthy is expensive. I totally get it. Eating healthy takes more time. My meal prep, it takes me several hours. There are days where I'll do it cheap, or I'll do it fast. I'll try to do it as quick as I can. And so I'll pick healthy options that are like pre-made, and those are expensive. Absolutely. If I go to Trader Joe's and I get pre-made, pre-cooked whole wheat, blah, 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 and then pour that into like a pre-cooked, it's all already microwavable, saves me a ton of time. Pack full of sodium, pack full of preservatives, all this like unhealthy stuff. So I mean, I get it, and it's all more expensive because it's already been, processed and put together. So weight control, like I said, is an example of energy balance, right? If there's more energy coming in, it will always result in weight gain. If there's less energy coming in, it will always result in weight loss. And if it's balanced. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't have to cost a lot, right? It does just have to take a little bit of time, a lot of times, but even that, like, yeah, once you know how to do it, is cheap, like I've got my meal prep down to a system at this point. I always make a list. I shop at Trader Joe's just because like I've committed to Trader Joe's because I found that it was like relatively inexpensive, and now I'm familiar with what's there, which saves me time in the long run. So by saving myself time that way, like that's, a little bit of energy and maybe money saved. And there's certain things I know that I don't buy at Trader Joe's. And so when I'm done, I immediately zip over to a Ralph's that I find really cheap. And then I zip over to Target where I get like any of my cleaning supplies that I need to buy every week. But like that took practice and refining. Yeah. That took like a lot of like practice, like learning how to do all that and getting into that routine. Talked to my parents at Trader Joe's on Sunday. My mom was like, we tried to buy this. You told us to get more olive oil, and I found this gallon of olive oil for sale. And I was like, ugh. I was like, okay. And if you go through it, great. And she was like, and I was like, did you look at the expiration date? And sure enough, it expires in like 4 months. And that's why it was on sale. And it's like, but didn't know to look for it, right? Didn't know to check for it. So now suddenly this healthy thing is going to go to waste. And in the end, that's expensive. So is it actually expensive? No, not with the right education, right? Again, this is kind of what our role comes in, right? We're not telling someone what to eat, but we might show them how to eat and let them make the choice themselves. Guided self-help, right? That's our job. So summarizing up that first chapter, We see like obviously obesity is on the grow at an alarming rate in both adults and youths, and so we need to combat that with knowledge, education, and effort. All right, looking at chapter. So make sure today, guys, you read through chapter 1. Review the PowerPoint, review the notes after this lesson, and then let's take a look at chapter 2. Let's take a look at the health effects of obesity. So this is a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, but again, these are the statistics that they like to throw test questions around. So we want to understand the different comorbidities that are associated with obesity, what some of the effects of those medications might have in terms of like during a session. If they have a disease and they're on a medication, what is that going to do to our workouts? Follow some basic exercise guidelines with those comorbidities, like if they have osteoporosis, you want to avoid foam rolling because their bones might not be very dense. And so like all that weight pressing onto a foam roller is great for the muscle, but there's bone underneath that which is like flexing. So that can be very, very painful. Probably not going to result in a fracture. I did have one client, sure enough, like I had one client, they weren't necessarily one of my one-on-one clients. They were just a person that I, in a group setting, and during like, one of the group exercise classes, they were like foam rolling their lat, and they rolled all the way down to their floating ribs, which are way down here, right? Which is not where your lats are exposed. But they didn't know any better. They got down there, broke a rib. It's the only time I've ever heard of foam rolling hurting someone. But it can happen. So introduction here, obesity, several different diseases, like I mentioned, thorough medical history and clearance from a doctor, always important before beginning to work with a client. We talked about that nutrition. Guess what? Shocker of the year, it applies to your training sessions as well. And so we need to use this information that they are going to give us not to formulate a diagnosis, because we super do not diagnose stuff, but so that we have an idea and a sample of like what any of their health problems associated with these diseases could possibly be. So we're going to look at type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, respiratory diseases, certain types of cancers, high cholesterol, and we will look at metabolic syndrome, which is all that weird stuff that I mentioned the other day about how like abdominal fat in particular starts to act in very funky ways, musculoskeletal disorders, and depression. So that's what we talk about, like a comorbidity. A comorbidity, just by definition, before we dive into each of these, a health-related condition that has effects on daily normal living, right? So a comorbidity, right, is it's like something associated with something else, right? When you consider like, when you have like a common cold, right? You have a runny nose and you have a headache, and maybe you have like, I guess like achy joints is more like of a flu. So if you have achy joints, you have the flu. But like, all those things that kind of come along with it, right? Those are all like co-symptoms that all come together. A comorbidity is where maybe a diet that is like low in nutrient density is associated with catching viruses and common colds more frequently, right? This is why they've been saying that like vitamin D is very good for like people who are getting access to like regular sun exposure are less likely to catch this coronavirus running around, right? And it's why it's one of the things they've been telling people, like get outside, try to get a little bit of sunlight in your life. It's not because like it reduces the symptoms. It's not because it cures the disease. It's because like it is less likely to result. We know that inside, like staying inside all day is a comorbidity associated, right? So it's a health related condition that affects your daily normal living associated with another disease, right? So diabetes is associated with obesity. Is it the cause of it? Not necessarily, right? You could be a totally normal BMI and have diabetes. You could be absolutely obese and not have diabetes. That's why it's associated, right? It's not the cause of. So type 2 diabetes, we're seeing a lot of people, right? 26 million people suffering from it, right? 90 to 95% are type 2. Honestly, type 2 is much more common, even though type 2 is the one that you basically develop oftentimes through poor diet, right? So here's the thing, right? We talked about, your body is either not producing or properly using insulin. Type 1 diabetes, your pancreas just isn't kicking out enough insulin, right? Type 2 diabetes, your cells have become resistant to the insulin because you have to produce so much of it because we are spiking through continued exposure to spiked blood sugar. Your body's just like, man, like we need more and more insulin, right? And eventually your cells just become resistant to it. They're like, there's no way we're supposed to be using this much insulin. They just stops using it. So insulin created by the pancreas to facilitate the uptake of that glucose into your body cells, right? And if that can't happen, then that blood sugar remains in your blood. Now, the reason that's so dangerous is it can result in what is called peripheral neuropathy. Peripheral coming from generally this exposes usually the hands and most commonly the feet. And neuropathy is going to be nerve damage. So this is nerve damage that typically manifests itself in the extremities, particularly in the toes and fingers, okay? Horror story here. I had a student tell me this. Her mom, so you have this, she had really bad diabetes, and it results in nerve damage, meaning you can't feel certain things, right? And her mom was like making food. She made like a thing of soup or whatever. And she was taking it over to a friend's house. She grabbed like the stock pot and she was like, how am I going to carry this freaking thing? How am I going to drive it in the car? So she put it in the driver's seat and then like held it with her like leg while she like drove. But she had really bad diabetes. She had peripheral neuropathy and she did not feel that super hot soup actually burned her. It actually gave her like 2nd-degree burns. And she had to have like a skin graft. That is what we're talking about when we talk about nerve damage here, right? Literally cannot feel it. If that happens, it is extremely dangerous and very important for us. This is your first piece of information that I promise you will be on a test somewhere and is really important to remember. One of our jobs, and it doesn't seem like it would be our job, but this is actually important, is to ensure that our clients who have diabetes are always taking special care to take care of their feet. And what I mean by that is like proper foot care. Make sure they are not wearing shoes that are too small for them. Make sure that they have socks that are wicking any moisture away. We do not want to get a blister on a client who has type 2 diabetes, because if they get a blister, let's say it's on their heel, right? And they don't feel it, and then it gets infected and they don't feel that infection, it can cause them to, it can be very dangerous, right? And that's why, this is one of the things that we have to be cautious of. I'll tell you, when I was working at Biggest Loser, guys, a lot of my job every morning was being on blister duty and like checking people's shoes off, socks off, take a look, you look good, right? Oh, you got a blister, let's make sure that we get that antiseptic, right? It was helping a lot of people with stuff like that. Doesn't seem like it'd be the role of a personal trainer, but if you get a client who has type 2 diabetes, teach yourself, learn how to get them like a synthetic fiber sock, teach them how to get proper shoes. That's actually big. So here's the thing though, we know that exercise has super positive effects on diabetes, right? It increases your blood sugar control because it increases your insulin sensitivity. So even if your pancreas is not producing enough insulin, because maybe you have type 1 diabetes, great, start exercising. Exercise will make your cells more sensitive to that insulin. So even the little bit that you do produce will work better. If your client has type 2 diabetes, we can resensitize those cells through exercise, because particularly moderate to high intensity exercise, which is primarily targeting glycolysis as an energy system, you are training the cells of your body to pull that sugar out of your blood and convert it to ATP, right? So that is one of the biggest things that we have there. Increased blood sugar control, increased insulin sensitivity. We absolutely love that about exercise. Looking at heart disease. Hopefully I didn't scare you guys anybody out of this career where you're like, I don't want to deal with feet. Yeah, I didn't think I wanted to deal with feet either. But you know what? You end up, where you're going to do the most good. All right. Looking at heart disease. Leading cause of death in the U.S. 25% of all U.S. related deaths. Let's see if, I can't look it up right now. With men accounting for more than half of that. Men are a larger percentage of the population are dealing with this. So guys, this is definitely much more common amongst male population. So we're going to call this coronary artery disease. That is a narrowing of the blood vessels that supply oxygen to the heart. Your heart, it's the pump that literally supplies everything around the body with oxygen and nutrients, right? And then all of a sudden, and it plays by the same rules that any other cells do. It needs to have like oxygen delivered to the tissues that make up, this organ. If you don't supply oxygen to it, that organ cannot live. And remember, we talked about this in physiology. Your heart cells have more mitochondria in them than any other tissue inside of your body, right? Packed full of mitochondria, which means it survives off of oxygen. We need to have great oxygen delivery to our heart muscle. So your coronary artery disease is where those arteries get blocked. And so that can lead to a myocardial infarction, which is a big fancy way of saying a heart attack, right? So we also know hypertension, highly associated with heart disease, right? Commonly referred to as high blood pressure. This is going to be if your blood pressure is 140/90 or any higher than that. This can be stress can lead to high blood pressure because stress hormones cause vasodilation in some places and vasoconstriction in the other. And so then those blood vessels just get stuck in those positions, basically. It's like an overactive muscle, right? If I walked around like this all day, which, if I'm stressed, I probably actually will. Eventually, these muscles are not going to want to relax back down, right? So the same thing is true in your blood vessels, right? So we see normal blood pressure will be around 120/80. A lot of times, and this is a little thing you'll see sometimes, it is often referred to as the silent killer. High blood pressure, because a lot of times it's associated with all of these other comorbidities. It can lead to those. So heart attack, stroke, if you are, constricting blood vessels and, blood starts to clot and accumulate in one specific area, and then all of a sudden maybe that clot finally gets dislodged and starts traveling around the body, and then it goes through these very small blood vessels that are heading up to your brain and it blocks them. Well, now your brain tissue is not getting oxygen. So a stroke, which is basically just like a heart attack, right? Blocked artery in your heart, that's a heart attack. Blocked artery in your brain, that's a stroke. It can also lead to kidney failure. There are a ton of blood vessels running through your kidneys because your kidneys are constantly filtering stuff. If there's so much pressure going through there, that can cause like a lot of damage. So we do know that high blood pressure is associated with these other diseases. Like I said, stroke is a blocked cerebral artery, causes inadequate blood flow. Stroke survivors, if you have a client who is a stroke survivor, a lot of times they will have impaired motor control. So you have to be aware of that. That can make exercising difficult, which makes them more sedentary, which can only make all of these problems worse. So it's important for us to find a way for them to safely exercise. It's not necessarily going to treat the stroke. It's not necessarily going to treat the stroke, but it will treat all of, it will prevent the stroke from doing any more damage, right? Again, associated with hypertension, heart disease, diabetes even, and an alcohol consumption as well has been linked to stroke. Respiratory complications, carrying around excessive fat, whether it's abdominal or not really, but particularly just like having an excessively heavy body means that your body has to do additional work in order to move your rib cage and open up the diaphragm. So it will often lead to shortness of breath. It can lead to exercise-induced asthma and even something called sleep apnea, which is a sudden stoppage in breathing patterns. So basically, your body gets into such a relaxed state, your muscles are contracting to help you breathe while you're asleep. It's all happening autonomically. But if your body's really, really heavy, those muscles aren't really designed to like contract for like a lot of force. So what'll happen is that weight will actually prevent someone from being able to breathe in, and then all of a sudden their body will go, it'll just like really big gasp, which usually causes people to wake up. This is not just common, actually, just for the record. This comes from having a heavy body. It's not necessarily just an obesity thing. It is a heavy body thing. So bodybuilders sometimes experience this as well, which is always ironic because you're like, you think all that muscle, right? You think it'd be easy to contract for enough to be able to like bring in enough oxygen, but that's just how heavy the body is. What is in my throat? We also have certain types of cancers that have been associated with obesity, particularly the most dangerous of which are going to be colon, breast, kidney, and esophageal cancers. Oh my God. My windpipe is like, what am I, having an allergic reaction? What is that?
I don't know. You could just jump off and hop around on one foot and then turn around and then cough a smell.
Maybe.
It's like when you have a sneeze and they're like, just jump.
Yeah,
It's
right.
okay.
Look at a light. God, I don't know what that is.
No.
I think that did it. I just needed a bigger drink. So very common, these particular types of cancers, right? 1.5 to 3.5 more times likely to develop these certain types of cancers compared with normal weight clients, right? So why is that? Well, again, we do know that like cancer is like an excessive growth of cells, right? There are more cells in the body with like an obese body, so there is like an association there. But also I think that a lot of times it's like the lifestyle choices that result in obesity are similar to the lifestyle choices that bring in a lot of processed foods. And I'm not always against like processed foods as a general blanket term, in the same way that I'm not necessarily against genetically modified foods as a blanket term, but chemicals that have certain like negative effects that might act as free radicals, we're always against that, right? Free radicals are very, very dangerous, damaging molecules to our bodies. So we do want to be, cautious with that. Dyslipidemia, aka high cholesterol, right? Increased total cholesterol and increased triglyceride concentration. So we do know that when, and this is why high cholesterol is associated with diabetes a lot of times, right? It's like, wait, weren't we talking about sugars with diabetes? Why are sugars affecting our cholesterols? Well, remember, like when you have like blood sugar, your body is going to pull that sugar out. Hopefully it'll store it as glycogen. If it can't store it as glycogen, it will convert it into triglycerides, and that's how it stores it as fat. That's what adipocytes, fat cells, right? That's what their job is to store these triglycerides. So your body converts that sugar into fat molecules and then stores it. This is why sugar is so bad for us, right? And so we know that, high cholesterol is even associated with high sugar diets. It's not always about the cholesterol you eat. People are always, oh, I forgot. I was going to show you guys a fun video. We'll end with a really fun video today. It's a sketch video. It's totally meant just for fun, but it's a great example of like what it's like to talk about, diets and stuff with our clients. So increased total cholesterol, increased triglyceride concentrations. Looking at our cholesterols, we've got our HDL, that's the good cholesterol, right? It basically cleans out our blood vessels. This is associated with our omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And then we've got our low density lipoproteins, that's your bad cholesterol. These are highly associated with saturated fats, right? So we know that even losing just 5 to 10 pounds reduces your overall cholesterol levels. Again, one more reason to participate in a regular exercise and healthy diet program. All right, now metabolic syndrome. Syndrome X. This is a very unique disease. Several different, metabolic syndrome is basically where all of these diseases start to act together, right? We start to see like diabetes, high blood pressure. We start to see all of them sort of having these odd interactions here. So it is cardiovascular disease, in combination. High cholesterol and hypertension, right? It is highly associated, like I said, with abdominal obesity in particular. So again, waist-hip ratios being important here, high cholesterol, blood pressure, and elevated glucose levels. And what happens with metabolic syndrome is we start to see really weird stuff happen in the body. We start to see like allergic reactions. You will actually sometimes see obese individuals, they'll start to get like rashes on the outside of their body. And it's like, it's like, I don't know what happened. If I touched like a plant that I wasn't supposed to, or if I changed like my laundry detergent. And it's just like the body will literally start basically attacking itself. Your immune system's job, right? It's there to react to foreign invaders, right? Like viruses and bacteriums and prions, all this stuff that like gets in the body. Your immune system's there to like fight all that stuff off, right? Well, what happens if your immune system is just like really sensitive to everything because we're just in general not in a healthy place, right? So we're in this like really unhealthy in general, and then your immune system just starts to act up. This is not 100% true, but I do like I think it's a very elegant way of putting it. When I was a kid in like 8th grade, our health teacher was telling us, like, we were like, what the heck are allergies? And they were trying to explain it. And he said, allergies are basically what your immune system does when it's bored. It starts to get sensitive to things that really shouldn't be sensitive to. That is not 100% true, but I do think it's a really elegant way to put it. And that is kind of how Syndrome X, metabolic syndrome, is kind of how it starts to act. Your body starts, attacking things that really it shouldn't be attacking, Again, it's a documentary meant to sell juicers. But if you ever want to watch Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, it has a really, the way it starts off is really interesting. The reason that guy went to the doctor is because he was having like rashes, joint pain. He was basically having like symptoms of like fibromyalgia or lupus. He was having symptoms of like these autoimmune disorders. He went to the doctor and his doctor's like, you don't have an autoimmune disease. Your body's just freaking out. It is allergic to I think he says it's allergic to itself, or maybe he says like it's allergic to your lifestyle or something like that. It's a very interesting thing. So we know that like, we can combat that with making adjustments in our lifestyle. And then we do have like certain musculoskeletal issues, right? We do know that like joint stiffness, decreased range of motion, tendonitis, sprains, all of those things can be associated with obesity, simply because there's a lot more pressure coming down on the joints of the body regularly. So we'll see bursitis, arthritis, again, fibromyalgia, which is just general joint pain. Stuff like that is associated with obesity. Low back pain, right? 80% of people, by the way, deal with low back pain at some point in their lives. And when I say low back pain, I don't mean they threw out their back temporarily. I mean like chronic low back pain that they'll deal with for months to, years at a time. Heck, I've got low back pain. Runs in my family. I've got a rare form of arthritis that is, inherited from my mom's side of the family. My uncle had surgery literally last week because of it. But like, I don't have as many symptoms as like the rest of my family does, because I spent a lot of time making sure that I try to bulletproof my back. But very, very common. 80% of the population will have low back pain at some point. So we know that being overweight and obese are linked to several debilitating diseases. We've already talked a lot about this. But here are a lot of the general stats that are important to have. In most cases, just simply improving your physical activity will really go like a long way. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I like to say when it comes to obesity in general. Obviously, as trainers, we are going to put a lot of emphasis on being physically active. But you will hear people say you cannot out-exercise a bad diet. Right? You'll hear that phrase. And that is true because like diet is absolutely so very important. But I will always counter that by also saying, well, you also cannot out posture or a diet is not going to do anything for your posture. And we know that like a lot of those musculoskeletal diseases and physical activity come from like moving. So it is a combination. This is, we want to play both sides of the field here. So any questions, guys? How are we feeling today? Questions, comments, concerns?
What was the homework page again to read?
It's like page 19, chapters 1 and 2.
Chapter 1 and 2. Got it.
Chapters 1 and 2. So please, everybody, read chapters 1 and 2 tonight. It'll always just correspond with whatever PowerPoints we're doing. The PowerPoints are written off the chapters. You'll notice the PowerPoint information goes in the same order as the chapters, but it'll just help you compartmentalize and absorb that info a little bit better.
This was off the. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, was this off the weight loss specialist manual?
Yes, and I don't mean chapters 1 and 2 of your regular NASM textbook. I mean chapters 1 and 2 of this manual right here, the weight loss specialist. So like I said, it's like 19 pages. Like it'll go up to the beginning of 17 pages. It'll go up to like the start of chapter 3. So you'll read to about. This makes it look like a lot because I have to scroll a lot, but it's just because my mouse doesn't move much. Yeah, you're good to about here, page 17. So if you read that, it'll really, really, really have a positive effect. I mean, and then I will give you guys, there'll be another manual later. This is the programming manual. You can find this for download now. Actually, I'll put this on today's lesson. But this has got a lot of free programs on it, which is kind of cool. So it's got basically it's a little kit. Here's a PAR-Q. Here is a data results sheet. And then it's got some monthly programs. Like what would it look like? What should your months look like for altering body composition? And then it's got free workouts on it and stuff, which is pretty cool. So a lot of really good resources in this class. Like I said, all of our program design classes have these little manuals, these little packets. Any other questions, guys? Cool. Do you guys want to watch a really, what I think is very funny video about eating healthy or not? I'm actually going to kill the recording before I show it, but are eggs good for you? Funny or die? This is a good one. All right, killing the recording. So I don't get my freaking video flagged.